Welcome to the Best Kind Design podcast, where we believe that the best kind of spaces support your emotional, mental, physical, and spiritual well being. Here we explore how the spaces we dwell make us well and unwell. Consulting accomplished experts that are doing fascinating work on the cutting edge of science and senses, I am your host, Sonia Randall, interior architect and owner of Best Kind. Thank you so much for being here. Let's dive in. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode where we are going to be chatting frequency rebalancing of spaces. This week's episode will appeal most to our spiritual listeners. However, I encourage everyone to take a listen with an open mind and an open heart. Just take what resonates and leave what doesn't. Our special guest this week is Ondre Seltzer, also known as Dr. Ondre. He is a world-renowned energy healer, intuitive, and empowerment coach. He is the founder of Frequency Energy Medicine, which is a technique that rebalances biofrequencies to promote natural healing. He travels all over the world to consult and to lead workshops for industry leading organizations and individuals. He is the in-house healer for Soho House West Hollywood. He is also affiliated with brands such as Lululemon and Alo Yoga. So Ondre and I had experienced some connection issues at the beginning of our call. So this episode really hits the ground running. Let's dive in. Well, Ondre, thank you for being here today. I am excited to chat with you about frequency rebalancing in spaces. You have a very unique job, to say the least. How would you describe to listeners what you do?
The last resort. You call me in when nothing else works. I'm a medium. I'm also a healer and I'm an intuitive. So I get called in when somebody or a company needs something extra special. And I base everything on science as well as the metaphysical. I kind of cross that boundary. So I'm a bit of a bridge, I suppose you'd call me.
So, part of what you do, like you're saying about rebalancing frequencies, how do you do that in spaces? And can you share how that started?
So ever since I was 7 years old, I've had the ability to see and feel energy. By the time I was 12, I couldn't really explain things, but I started to observe that around things I could see energy. And one night I was listening to a radio show, and it was talking about transmitting and receiving signals, and it was really talking about TV and film and radio and how they transmit things. Something clicked inside of me, and I realized we receive and we transmit energy. So, the tender age of 12, I began to study frequencies. So, and I realized that if someone's in discord, someone's sick, someone's mentally ill, somebody is dealing with some issue, I feel that as almost the wrong sound, like fingers on a chalkboard. And I realized that we're all conductors of our own energy. And if I could help people conduct their energy better, then I wouldn't have to listen to these horrible sounds all the time. So basically, it was kind of selfish. I realized if I help people, it just made me feel good, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I was just thinking that. Exactly what you said. So, in terms of, like when you walk into a new space,
Yeah.
what what do you sense or feel? How do you experience the space in a way like differently than other people?
Well, I think we all do this to a certain extent. We walk into a new space and we have this protective layer. It warns us when there's danger. We don't always listen to it. Imagine that 1,000 times stronger. When I walk into a room or a space, I feel things, and I feel when things are out of balance. So I want to get the balance back to make myself comfortable, but also I see how it affects different people in that room. So walking into a new place, getting into a plane, walking down the high street, whatever it is, I'm constantly receiving and transmitting energy, but I'm receiving information that something's wrong. I think sometimes if you're a police officer or if if someone's been in a war zone, you have the same kind of a thing. You have an extension where you're very aware of danger, and you're probably a lot more observant of what's going on than the average person. So I think I'm just hyper observant. and hypersensitive to the environment around me.
I love how you describe that because I'm thinking, like you said, everybody senses things when they move into spaces. And, for the listeners that, are a little bit more science minded,
Hmm.
for example, one thing that everybody can relate to is walking into a boardroom and, feeling the tension so thick you could cut it with a knife. Like that is literally sensing energy. And I remember I read a study recently when I was doing research on our olfactory system.
Hmm.
And there were studies done that we literally smell fear. We pick it up in the sweat
Yep.
of people.
Yep.
So, everybody, we're sensing things all the time. So, and you being hyper tuned to that, hypersensitive to that, for one, that's remarkable. But also, that sounds exhausting. Is it exhausting?
It is when things aren't going well. But you just made a really great comment there. They use dogs now to smell cancer, and also people with diabetes, they can smell when their blood sugars are too high or too low. I've been doing that since I was 7 years old.
Wow.
I can smell disease, but plants are better at smelling disease than dogs. Plants have a higher auditory factor on their leaves and can have more smell sensors than a dog's nose. So plants pick up on sickness as well. So when a plant's not doing well, that's normally a sign there's a problem. But is it overwhelming? I think it was, and I think it is if you don't want to hear, but I don't have a choice. So I can either shut down and I'll probably end up in a really bad place, or I can keep on pursuing. So I literally I don't take breaks. I work 7 days a week. I average 4 to 6 hours sleep a night. I'm traveling all the time, but I absolutely love what I do. And the greatest thing is when you make someone who's not smiled for a long time, or someone who's been in pain, or someone who's been scared, and you turn that around after many, many years, you feel like you've done something.
Yeah, I mean, yes, definitely. I can see how that feels good, but I can also see how it might get addicting.
Well, it drives people crazy because they spend time with me and it's non-stop. I mean, literally, just this morning, my first call was at 4 a.m., and then I had to jump on a plane, fly, just landed, gone in for this interview. But what an adventure! And I think I've noticed that people that sleep a lot are still tired,
Yeah.
and which makes no sense. If you need that much sleep and it's still tired, it's not the sleep that's a problem. There's something tiring in your life. So I sleep less than most people I know, but I'm always fully alert, fully awake, and ready for the next laugh, the next smile, the next miracle, or the next possibility.
You know, that's interesting you say that about energy levels. I had a conversation with a friend not that long ago where I don't know the science behind it or, just generally the energy. But I had mentioned to them that I feel like, when you've been in love, for example, I
Yes.
feel like my health has improved, like physically. I feel like my physical body works better.
Hmm.
And, I don't know how to explain it. I don't know why, but it's definitely something that I know at a very deep level that that's happening.
Well, I think it was Stanford that did this experiment. They had a man in a room lifting a weight with his arm, and as soon as he got tired, they opened the door and let a beautiful cheerleader walk in. And all of a sudden, he was able to lift this weight and keep on going, and just for like there was no pain, no gain. And what they said is that people influence us, and this is why it's important to have beautiful things around you and to experience beautiful things. If you're constantly looking at trauma or you're constantly looking in the mirror and not liking yourself, that actually physically, spiritually, and mentally becomes a disease that once it sets too much, you're not going to be able to lift that weight. You're not going to be able to do anything at all. And then all of a sudden, a friend calls you and you're having the worst day of your life, and they call you and everything changes. Communication, friendships, special moments, everybody should have one. It should be part of the culture. We should be giving gifts to people and we should be told that we have to have time off and do certain things. And even though I work this great schedule, I'm having a lot of fun. I, I really am having a lot of fun.
That's great. I love that. I again, like there's a lot to unpack there, but one of the things when so in terms of you saying like surrounding yourself with beautiful people in terms of their energy, like
Mhm.
beautiful energy, which is very important, like intentionally who you're around, and also in terms of spaces and things. So to spaces, what are certain objects or things that you recommend for people to enhance the frequency of their spaces?
So let's go back quickly to the people to bring it into line with what we're talking about with spaces. Everybody is not perfect. So everybody has their problems. So what I do is I'm working with people, I see their beauty and don't really bother with the things they're doing wrong. It's the same with the buildings and places I walk into. I want people to practice gratitude with what they got. Thank you for the couch. Thank you for the blinds. Thank you for the plant. Thank you for these different things. Once you start looking at the things that you have and having gratitude, if there's something missing in that room, you can always add it later, but start by bringing gratitude, the fact that you've got a space to be in, and then build out from there, if that makes sense. So I apply that to people, to situations. Like I just flew recently and it was a terrible flight, but I was grateful that the plane took off safely and landed safely. All the drama that was going on in the plane didn't affect me because I chose to look at the positives in what I was seeing. So
Right.
in your space, move things and don't be afraid to change things, even though the designer said it's got to go there and so on and so forth. What
Right.
feels right to you? Create the space that makes you feel like you're in a sanctuary, and that's a good start to having a place that will help you grow. Where you live is very important because it's the place of safety, but it's also the place of creativity. You want to keep that space constantly creative. Do not bring your problems home. So when you get through the door, my grandmother used to have what we call a worry tree, and it was a little plant outside the door. And when she came home from work, she'd touch the tree, leave all her problems, and the next morning she'd touch the tree and go back to work. But she would never bring negative energy into a home. So these are little things people can do. But and take your shoes off. Don't walk in the house with the shoes on because you're bringing the energy from where you've just traveled, where you've just come from. Just leave the shoes by the door and just come through. And it does make a huge difference.
I love that. And what I'm hearing you say, partly of leaving the home and coming in is kind of like that intention and mindfulness that you're setting, that
Yes.
frequency, but also, for those who are more accustomed to, say psychology and that sort of thing, that that's has a lot of benefits of positive thinking, and it's setting an intention carries a long way.
Yeah.
So, whether you want to say it in terms of energy or if you want to say it as, mental health, they're both the same thing. Is the point.
Well, look at the science behind this. Let's look at survival, for instance. It's a fact that the people that survive in situations that other people don't quite often have a different outlook.
Mm.
So if they're trapped in the middle of a desert, the person you most want to be around is the person that has a positive attitude and really believes they're going to come out of it. They're manifesting their safety.
Right.
And even if they don't get to the point where they get rescued, they live longer and survive better and less trauma than the person that gives up.
Right.
So, but is that also not creating the energy to be found as well? Is it possible that if you have this energy and believe that something's going to happen, it's so strongly that it does happen? And I think if you look at successful people, and I work with a lot of very successful people, especially in Hollywood, they all have one thing in common. They almost lost everything, but they believed there was something coming. And Jim Carrey lived in his car and it was about to leave LA and he got that one interview and boom, look at his career today. So many people that I've met that have success have had to face the darkest point and they've been tested to see which direction they're going. Do they keep on going or do they give up? Go ahead.
I love that. And as you were saying, it was reminding me actually of my hypnotherapist. I love hypnotherapy, by the way. I think if anybody's interested in shadow work or, just helping you reprogram things, if you have certain patterns, it's amazing. But I remember one time I had spoken to him and he said to me, he's like, if you're walking down the road with someone and there's an emergency, you say there's two people walking down the road and there's an emergency and someone needs help. who do you want to help you? The person that is stressed out, that is kind of in that mindset of, oh my God, like this is, negative, or the person that is in this positive, calm mindset. And,
Mhm.
we were just basically talking about that person's thinking clearly. That person can come up with solutions. That person can be creative. And so, I love that you said that. And in terms of your home, how you move through it and having an intention coming in and leaving, I think that's a great idea. I love that.
And crystals play a great part. They especially things like amethyst and quartz. But be careful with quartz. You have to cleanse it at least once a month because it sort of absorbs energy. But art is not just art. It is something unique to every single person. It's a statement. It's an energetic feeling. So I like Picasso. Some people don't like Picasso, but I also like Rembrandt. So my home is decorated in different ways, but I have my Rembrandt room and I have my Picasso room, and in my office is my Picasso. So I've got my, not the real ones, but I've got my little fake Picassos around. So art is beautiful, music, and but also one of the things that works really well in the environment is the sound of water. These little water fountains you can get make a huge difference. They put out ions first of all, but that sound will actually calm down even the most, well, frenetic of people. So these little things, try them. They're not expensive, but you put a little waterfall in the corner of a room and some gentle music, and you'd be surprised how productive you become, but also how people, when they come into the environment, feel safe and relaxed. And especially with guests, you can try different things. Little lights, little twinkling lights, and all these different things do make a difference. Designers will probably roll their eyes at me, but I think it's good to design a place, but then you have to make it a home as well.
No, yeah. I mean, this so the spirit of this podcast is just that. It's how to use space to facilitate health and well-being.
Hmm.
And I use the word facilitate because I'm acknowledging the fact that your human body and everything you have going on there, impacts how you can receive those energies. But then also that, you're using it more like a tool. It is a tool there to help enhance and improve and heal. So, that's kind of the point. And I yes, I agree. The sounds and water, they're both amazing. And all of this stuff, the sensory systems, as well as what we're talking about, which overlaps, with the frequencies.
Yeah.
It's more, as you said, you have a heightened sensitivity. So in terms of your senses, so you said you kind of feel it and you smell it. So if you're in a space, in terms of your heightened sensitivity, what do you feel or see in terms of balance in a space? Things that are off balance or things that are in balance?
So it's an interesting that we have that conversation right now because I've seen this a lot, especially in hotels when I'm traveling. You walk into a space, and people think it's often the person that was there before you. It's not always the case. There's something, the way the building's aligned or the way the furniture is in that room, that can make a difference between a good night's sleep and a bad night's sleep. One of the things I get asked a lot is, Andre, I can't sleep at night. Or what do you suggest? And the first thing I'll say is, where's your router? Where's your Wi Fi? Move it as far away from where you're sleeping as possible. And then, what's the position of your bed? And then, do you have any essential oils? Buy a diffuser and maybe have lavender or something that you really like at night and in that room and during the day as well. But the one thing is, when I walk into a space, I look at everything. I'm hypersensitive, so I feel it, I smell it, I see it, and I witness to it. And I want to say what a witness to it is, when I walk into that space, I feel like I'm on a crime scene, basically. What do we need to clean up? What happened over here? Because quite often there's been, let's say you had a breakup with your boyfriend. Did you ever clean that area where you had that big argument? Is that the place that you were crying for so long? Do you need to move that chair? And also create a little space. It can just be a chair. But in one case, one lady turned a little closet into a place she'd sit in, and she had her books in there and a little light. She made like Harry Potter theme. It was incredible. Somewhere that you can escape within your sanctuary. So you've got the sanctuary and you've got the inner sanctum. So once you've got all these things sorted out, put a chair somewhere in a corner of a room or a closet or whatever that you can go and sit and be away from the world, if only for 10 minutes. And that becomes your safe space. So if ever you're having trauma, You can go in that space and it's like going into a temple. You will feel it being released, and everybody should do that.
When you're saying about, kind of a sacred space, I compare it to, my first thought goes to just, for people that meditate, especially, they can relate to this, of how if you have a special area that you meditate in every day, if you have
Yeah.
that special candle that you light, if you have the special music that you play, literally when you sit down, your body starts to get ready even before you do anything. It's the energy of that space. Um
I, I,
and the
take, I take my
sorry.
space. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you, but I take my space with me. I have a yoga mat, and I've handwritten all my affirmations on the yoga mat as I get them, and I'll take it with me when I'm traveling. So I'll go in some distance, I'll just throw it in my suitcase. It's one of those thin ones, and I'll pull it out. I'm not the best yoga person in the world, but I've got my mat with all my affirmations on that I can do my practice on. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you, but I just mentioned that.
Oh, I love that. And I think that that's a great idea for people, because I mean, let's be honest, space is limited when you're traveling. So
Yeah,
that's a good way. That's a good way to, to kill two birds with one stone, for lack of a better phrase. Um, so in terms of when you had said there about clearing out energy, because you had mentioned where you were crying or where you had an argument,
yeah.
how would you recommend to someone to clear out energy in a space where they had more of, kind of a negative emotion or feeling or experience?
Well, the first thing to do is to feel it. Take your hands and just feel around it and see where you feel the space is, how big it is. And you can sage. Now, if you go into sage, there's several ways of doing it, but you always open all the windows and doors and make sure the energy leaves the house or the apartment, and then just sprinkle a little bit of salt so it doesn't come back in. You can also get clary sage, the oil, add it with a bit of alcohol and water, and make a spray or a spritz, which is just as effective. And you don't need to really open the doors with that because the water molecules draw the energy down and drop it to the ground. So it just dissipates that way. So it's a bit easier. And the third thing is do something beautiful in the home. Have a weekend. You have friends over, and you do affirmations. You maybe do some yoga in the room. You laugh and you joke. Bring love and hope into that space, and that will often get rid of anything that's there. But don't keep items that may have belonged to somebody that was once not the best person in your life. Let those things go because sometimes they can contain energy. And an example would be this lady who had this hat that was given to her by her ex, who was not such a good person, and she loved this hat. But every time she wore it, something would happen. She broke her knee, got into a car accident, she fell down some stairs, and I said to her, "Were you wearing the hat when these things happened?" She said, "Yes." I said, "Get rid of the hat." So she got rid of the hat, and immediately she felt different, but she was attached to the relationship and the pain and was keeping the hat as a reminder of the good things that happened in that relationship, not remembering the bad things that happened. So
That's no, that's a good point.
clear the space and just think of it that things collect energy. It's called psychometry. Things will store energy. So if something doesn't feel right, then let it go, and it might the next place it might goes to, it might be beneficial to that person because once it's left you, the energy disappears. It's your connection to that item. So when that hat went to somebody else, that person probably had a great experience with the hat. It's weird how it works, but that's what happens.
Yeah, and I mean, it's always better to donate things. So I like I like that you brought that up. So in terms of people that have furry friends and,
Yes.
fur babies, what would you recommend to clear spaces? I mentioned that because I have a fur baby, and she seems very sensitive to sage or Palo Santo. So I just stopped using it. I stopped using it, and I actually reached out to aromatherapist this morning to ask what they recommended. What would you recommend to clear spaces for not just me, but for all of the people who have fur babies?
So use the spritz when you've got animals around. Use the spritz. It's quick. It drops to the ground. It does. The smoke can be very detrimental to a lot of animals, especially to cats. They can react to
Mhm.
it. So the other thing that I use a lot of is rose oil and neroli. So neroli is orange blossom. And I mix that with alcohol and water, and I actually spray that a lot when I'm working and around people. I like clary sage because very few people react. I'm not saying clary sage, not just sage. Sage
Okay.
as an essential oil is very sharp and it's not the best. Clary sage is a bit softer and more perfumey and works just as well as sage. But rose, what rose does, it leaves that feeling that you are surrounded by love. And if you add neroli to it, it's a combination of orange blossom and rose. It is an incredible smell, an incredible energy, and very rarely do animals react to it. Obviously, you don't get it in their eyes or anything along those lines because of the alcohol, but it definitely makes a difference in the space. That's my go-to, and I actually travel with a little bottle of the rose oil wherever I go.
I love that, and I just I wanted to emphasize that point because I didn't know that that would bother her, and so for people that, just aren't thinking, because I literally wasn't thinking, and then I recognized, "Oh, wait, I think this is bothering her," and then you
Well,
feel bad, so,
I- I-
I think it's important for
imagine
people to
that your
think about.
nose, you can smell things 1,000 times more now, today. You're going to react to things in a different way. So especially smoke, and animals often relate to smoke as danger. So
Mhm.
I've noticed this with horses, especially when people sage the barns, it's very uncomfortable to the horses because they're smelling burning, and it feels danger in their minds. The place is going to burn down, so to speak.
Yes, yes, definitely. That is exactly the experience of my cat. She immediately will run and find another place. So that's a great solution. So in terms of plants,
Yes,
so plants in the home, we know that there's a lot of healing benefits of plants. Last week, we actually did an episode with an environmental psychologist, and she talked about how, plants can literally help lower your cortisol. It helps to regulate your nervous system. It helps you feel better moods in spaces. I'm a huge advocate for plants for people. As a designer, I like plants as much everywhere as you can. That works with the aesthetic. But from your perspective as a frequency rebalancer, how do you experience plants and how do you feel about them being used in spaces?
plants are very, very important, but I'm going to look at the more of how that works rather than say what happens, what caused it to happen. So first of all, I think I mentioned this before, but there's three men that they had in England had allotments. So allotments are small areas where they can grow fruits and plants. And the scientists wanted to see what would happen if they all grew at the same time, the same seeds. There were carrots, there were tomatoes, and I think there was I forget what the vegetables were, but they all had to grow on exactly the same portion of land and all next to each other. When they analysed the plants, it was one plant had a higher magnesium, the other one was higher in sugar, the other one was higher in iron, and they couldn't figure it out. So they did blood tests on the three men, and they found this is what they were deficient in. The plants from the same seeds, grown in the same soil, changed and adapted for the people that were growing them. So every time you put a plant, it's giving to you either oxygen, energy. It's changing not just the cortisol levels, but spiritually, it's feeding back. If the plant's not doing well, it's something going on with you, and you really need to not just fix the plant, not just keep giving it more water or food or anything. Work on yourself and move the plant in a place where it feels more comfortable. Move it to your sanctuary spot or wherever it is that you've built. And that plant, once it's connected to you, it is like your cat. It's always going to be giving. So you know that cats will sit on you if you're in pain. Cats can smell cancer. Cats and dogs react to you when things aren't going right. So do plants. So
Mm.
plants are so important in the environment. And what the psychologist would tell you is that when people put plants in, there's a dramatic change in the environment, especially amongst children. And we've seen people with ADHD and young children with autism, simply putting a couple of plants into the house has made a huge difference. I mean, dramatic differences. And we tend to be devoid of that right now. We don't have as much nature. And as a designer, I'm sure you feel this. When you finish everything and you put the plant in, it kind of seals the space. So
Yeah.
if someone doesn't have a plant and you're not good with plants, just get a small cacti, something that doesn't take much maintenance. But I really like these hydroponics where you have these towers that you can put in your kitchen and you can grow vegetables in them. And
Mhm.
the food that you grow is going to be more nutritious to you because the plants grow for you. So if you're growing lettuce or you're growing things in that environment, and everybody should get these hydroponic towers, you're actually maybe reducing your risk of certain diseases, but also you have a new friend.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And do you see do plants have auras the same as people? Do you see colors with plants? What do you feel and see with them?
So the different thing about me and seeing colors is I see like a rings around a tree. So when I look at a person, I see multi thousands of layers, and it's taken me a lifetime to kind of figure all these out. Plants often have more energy than people because they've been on the planet longer. So trees, for instance, as you probably know this, the mycelium or the fungi connects everything in the forest. So every tree in a forest is joined. But did you know if you cut a tree down in Alaska, it can affect a tree in Southern California? That's how connected these things are. What happens is, to me, the connection between plants and humans is something that needs to be really understood, and not scientifically, but on a spiritual level.
Mhm.
And ask yourself, what plants do I need in my environment? What things do I need around me that make me feel better? And for some people, it's a lot of greenery, others, it's flowers. And for some people, it's just something as simple as having one tiny plant in the corner of a room that makes a difference. Remind me of your
Right.
question. I think I went off track on that one.
Yeah, no, but that was very interesting. No, I had mentioned I had asked what do you see or feel around plants that are a little, different than what some, a normal,
So
let's say that, a normal level of sensory person would experience.
I feel that they sense danger quicker than we do.
Okay.
They're very sensitive to the environment. They can sense pollution. But plants, when I'm around plants, I feel like it's no different to being around a person. They just speak differently and they communicate differently. And I know this for a fact that when I'm in a forest, I sometimes feel like I'm being watched, and some plants are grumpy, and some plants are happy to have me there, and some plants wish I wasn't walking through the forest. But I feel like there's a whole conversation going on when I walk into where there's a lot of plants. And I've also found that people that have a lot of plants tend to be a lot more spiritual.
Yeah. And I want to preface because I'm a designer and I'm also spiritual, but I will be very intentional about my plants and kind of the art form of colors and language. And I think that's important when you walk into, if you walk into a jungle, it has a very different vegetation than if you are in northern Canada. And there's a look that nature creates very beautifully, its own composition. And I just want to mention that because I do think that plants together, there is kind of an art form of that too in terms of look and feel around it. In addition to the energy that you're speaking about, just knowing what you like or you're gravitating.
Well, you're an environmental designer, so
Yeah,
you're not just going for the aesthetics. You're going for the feng shui. You're going for the feel. So that sets
definitely.
you apart from someone that's just making things look pretty. And I would say that most designers have to be spiritual in order to design because you've got to be creative, and creative people tend to be very spiritual. So with plants, I think the plants are choosing you more than you're choosing them. If that makes any sense.
Oh, I love that. Tell me more.
I feel like you get pulled towards a certain plant in a certain
Mm.
environment, and maybe the plant's calling out to you and saying, "Hey, I'd like to be there." And maybe
Oh, I
what's
love
happening
that.
is the more you work with plants, the more they open up. Do you ever grow your own food at all? You mentioned the hydroponics. Do you ever?
I haven't. It's kind of a dream of mine to have, a garden, of some sort. But even like you had said, even in your kitchen, I could just have something to grow. But no, I haven't. But as soon as you said that, I noted it as I'm going to look, I'm going to look into that.
Go on Amazon. They're not expensive, and you get these little grow towers. You start off with a small one. You can have one that fits on the top of a table or next to your sink. And the first time you pick one of those raspberries, the first time you try that sage, you'll never be able to buy anything in the store again. You'll realize how much beauty there is in growing the plants because we are symbiotic with the plants. And I think we've forgotten it. But if you talk to anybody that has a really big garden or someone that works in a space where they're surrounded by plants, they will tell you they have names for the plants. They
Mhm.
know when they're sick, they know when they want something. But if you've ever tried something out of somebody's garden that genuinely loves their garden, their fruit is going to taste like nothing else.
Yes, I mean, for sure, you can tell. I think that part of it, back to that everybody can sense things. We all have the ability to feel into what we're experiencing. It's, I know you have a heightened gift, ability for sure. But even in terms of food, like, when that food, if there's been love put into that food, or if that was, a labor of, I don't want to be making this. And, you can literally taste it. You can taste it when someone, loves the craft of what they're doing. Even like, a chef going to a restaurant and it's like every piece is a masterpiece. It's not just, I guess I'm highlighting this here is because people will often contribute things that are expensive, or an experience sometimes, to a superficial thing.
Yeah,
And part of this podcast was also what I really want to bring attention to is that it's the experience. It's, yes, it may be beautifully crafted. Maybe there is an aesthetic that they put into it, but it's about, the love behind it. Someone who's creating an experience in a restaurant, say a chef who owns it and it's, Michelin star, what have you. That is a lot of positive, beautiful energy going, typically into that space, typically.
I'll give you an example. Not far from here, there's a very beautiful house, and this lady was couldn't say everybody came into the house wanted to buy it, but nobody bought it. And this isn't a time when everybody's buying houses. So the real estate agent said, "I'm going to introduce you to a designer. I want you to come in, and I wanted to just let her do a thing." So this girl comes in, and she's not fancy. She's kind of got a woolly hat on, and she's got tattoos everywhere. And this girl comes in, she moves a few things, tells the woman to do this, this, and this, and her husband to do this and to move these things around. And it's $5,000. And they call the real estate. We're not paying $5,000. This is impossible. There's no way we can. This is expensive. She doesn't do anything. She said, just pay the money. So anyway, left. The very next day, a couple walks into the house, loves the house, and they said, we'd like to buy the house, but there's one problem. Can we close as quickly as possible? And is cash okay?
Mm.
And they paid over the value. And just so happened they paid $5,000 over the price. Designers are healers of space and energy. So when you go into an environment that's someone who's got that specific the talent, and by the way, it's an incredible talent, to make a space change, not only will you sell the space if you want to sell the space, but you can also make it a better environment. I'd like to see designers go more into homes where children have problems and help set the house, or to deal with situations where people feel very sad at home or have gone through divorce. I think there's a time now where we need designers to step up and really not just be a new house or the sale of a house, but what about creating an environment that helps heal the person that lives in it?
In terms of a person that needs, healing or help, say from a divorce or, a child, how, when you would walk into a space, say of that individual, what would you kind of look for, and what potential tweaks would you make? How would you approach it?
Well, a good example is I walked into a place recently. As I stepped into the door, the first thing I do is I feel everything. So it's overwhelming when I first walk in. The last thing I want to do is talk to the person. So I ask them to wait be behind me or to be out of the space. Just let me walk through it. I walk through it, and without any judgments, I feel these things. Most of the time, I get into an argument with the people because they don't want to move that painting, or they don't want to move that chair, or they like this particular thing in that place. So I go in and make a list, and then I sit down and I say, look, I want you to trust me to make some changes, and this is what we're going to do. Are you open to making changes? And if you're not, then I think I have to leave right now because some of these things you're not going to agree to. And sometimes it's as simple as moving fridge magnets or changing where a bookcase is or any of these different things. And it can be dramatic. Other times it's finding things that are dangerous. I mentioned this lady, I get people to draw a picture of their environment. I'll ask them to take a pendulum and over the picture, and wherever the pendulum stops or goes crazy, look at that room. And there's one lady actually in LA, and she kept going back to this room, back to this room, couldn't figure out what it was, called me in. We moved the couch, and there was a brown burn mark on the back of the wall. A cable that ran through the whole apartment was got so hot that it could have caught fire. So it wasn't just an environmental thing, it was a safety issue. She found it. The place could have burnt down. So you're looking, the observation is not just how does it feel good, is this,
Right.
can I make this space real? Can I make it, can I leave this space with this person calling me back and say, Andre, I don't know what you did. It's incredible. I challenge myself to not just be good, but to be the best. And when I'm doing this with companies that may be a whole office block of 27 floors, it's a little difficult to do that, but it's a great challenge. Every single floor has a different energy. And that's where you see me challenged. That's where you see me really being put through the loop to make each one of each one of those floors and environments to work well.
Interesting. And do you pair up sometimes with designers? Will you collaborate with them sometimes in terms of, because well, you have different specialties. Like I definitely have an ability for design and I do that. But if I wanted to, just have another person weigh in terms of the balance of that space, do you ever do that?
Well, it's strange in London, in Paris, in Europe, no problem at all. In America, I found designers very resistant to bringing people like me in. And even when I've given advice, there's often an argument about, well, you can't move that plant, you can't do that. So I think it's a different culture for designers that I've seen here. That's the West Coast. I'm not sure the East Coast, but in Europe, designers love me, and I often do. I've done a lot of things with designers, and it's been a lot of fun because designers are creatives. They're a blast to be around, and a one stroke of a paintbrush, one picture can make a huge difference in a space. I just love designers.
No, definitely. Well, I had spoke to a little bit before, but this podcast is really to help to bring awareness for people that just how their spaces influence and impact their health and well-being. But also part of that, I when I describe what I do, well, one, I describe myself as a translator. So I'm going in and I'm assessing a person in a lot of different ways based on their needs, wants, health and well-being, all of that. And their aesthetics, and then I translate that into an environment
Yeah,
aesthetically that I think will reflect who they are. But, as part of that process, I like to, compare myself to like a primary care doctor in the sense that I know quite a bit about lighting. I know, some about sound. I know quite a bit about plants, but I'm not an expert in any of those. There's a reason why people dedicate their lives to these crafts. It's just too much to know for everything. And so that's why I had mentioned with you, I think that there is a great opportunity and I love to hear that people in Europe are doing that. And I'll definitely be doing that with you if you're open to it.
well, without
For the
mentioning
right
names,
client.
I work with a huge corporation that has houses all over the world. I think you know who I'm mentioning. And I go into
Yes.
their spaces, and they're multi complex houses that are social clubs. And
Mhm.
it is amazing what we can do. And I work with their designers very, very closely. And
Love it.
right now, they're revamping all of them. So I'm going to be traveling a lot this year all over the world, going to these various locations. And they let me go in raw, and then the designer will work with me entirely with me on putting the design together. And these are high profile designers, but I've proved myself so many times. But tried to work with a company in Los Angeles, and even offered to do free service for them. Could not make it work. And
Right.
I gave my resume, my PhDs, all the things that I've done, and they just would not work with me. And I realized that it's going to be a challenge, at least on the West Coast, but I don't really care because worldwide, catch up California because it's happening. With people like,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I agree with you. And when I heard you say that, I was kind of thinking, because I actually lived in the UK for a while. I'm not sure if I told you that, but I worked in a design firm there. That's how I knew I wanted to go into design.
Mhm.
And what I noticed when I came to America, like people know it aesthetically, like aesthetically, typically, the North America is like 5 to 10 years behind Europe. It just is. I remember I worked there and then I came here and it was like years later. I was like, what? I literally was doing that, 5, 6 years ago, in the UK. So people get that, but I think that you're speaking to the similar thing. I think that things that will catch on here, it's just not that part of the wave yet, I guess.
I think you're a pioneer, and I think what you're doing right now is you're probably changing the world. in the way that you are approaching things, and you're on the cutting edge. There's a shift coming, and you're in the middle of that shift. You are starting to see, and you're probably hearing this from your clients. They're asking you about feng shui. They're asking about energy. They're asking about these things. And if you want to, if you have a project right now, just send me do a drawing of it. Send it to me without no any information, and for free, I'll take a look at it and I'll tell you what I feel. And
Okay.
let's see what happens there. And I do this all the time with trying to track people down when I work with the police and so on and so forth. The least amount of information I know, the better can be the energy. The less you tell
Mhm.
me, the better it is. But I want to
That-
leave, I want to say, I want to, first of all, I want to thank you for taking the risk by bringing people like me to the forefront. And you're bringing some very highly qualified people for the general public to speak to. And what you're doing right now is you are allowing people to realize they've been right all the way along. Because most people already know all this stuff, they've just been afraid to speak out.
Well, thank you. No, I appreciate that. It feels natural, to be honest. It just feels like that's what's supposed to happen. Okay. Well, thank you. I know you have a busy day and you've already had a long day. So thank you for your time. It was a pleasure. And I'm excited to share this with people.
And I
I
hope I
know
answered
that
all the questions. I went off in different directions as I always do, but and I'm happy to come back again at any time. But please send me a little thing to look at, and if I can help you in some way, and
I will.
just surround yourself with what feels good, and not necessarily with things you have to do.
Okay.
If that makes sense, I'm alluding to something there. So,
Yes. Yes, you are.
so
Thank you.
take good care. Good to see you, and I appreciate you letting me come and join you today. This has been amazing.
Thank you, Andre. I'll talk to you soon.
And take care.
Bye.
Bye bye.
That's it for this episode. Please remember before you go to subscribe below. You can also check us out on Instagram at bestkind.design or our website at bestkind.design. Best Kind Design's interior services are also available for hire. So if you have a residential, commercial, or a hospitality project, we'd love to hear from you. You can reach us at info@bestkind.design. Until next time, be well.